The darkness of the abyss is absolute. 3,000 meters below the surface of the North Pacific, light doesn't exist. It has to be brought. I watched the monitors intently as Triton's powerful beams cut through the eternal night, illuminating a world few human eyes had ever witnessed. "Approaching the vent field now," announced Eliza, our ROV pilot. Her fingers danced across the controls like she'd done it 1,000 times. "Camera feed is stable. Everyone getting this?" A chorus of yeses echoed through the cramped control room of the Argo. 12 of us were packed shoulder to shoulder, all staring at the wall of screens like pilgrims at an altar. The air smelled like coffee and excitement. "There," I said, pointing at the center display. "That formation, it's nothing like anything in our survey records." Triton's lights had found something unbelievable. A cluster of bulbous, geode-like lumps tucked between two giant black smokers. They glowed from inside, looking somehow alive and rock-like at the same time. Shimmery veins ran through their see-through surfaces, bending Triton's lights into rainbows. "My God, Rowan," Captain Moore breathed beside me. "What are we looking at?" "I don't know," I admitted. It wasn't something I usually said, especially as a senior geochemist with 20 years in the field, but I aimed to find out. That's why they'd brought me aboard the Argo. Weird mineral formations from extreme places were my specialty, my obsession. This discovery, whatever it was, could cement my legacy. After decades of careful research and writing papers, I might finally have something that would make Dr. Rowan Waller a name in textbooks forever. "Grabbing samples now," Eliza said, working Triton's robot arms with feather-light touches. Dr. Aris Shelton, our head biologist, leaned so close his nose almost hit the screen. "Go easy," he warned, though he sounded thrilled. "They're reacting to movement. See how they pull back when the arm gets close?" He was right. The lumps pulsed faster as the mechanical arm moved in, their inner glow brightening like a shield. It felt off. Rocks don't flinch. Rocks don't pulse. "Get them on board," I said, pushing down my unease and shifting to commander mode. "Full quarantine rules until we know what we've got." 3 hours later, I watched as the sample container moved from Triton's bay to the main lab. The lumps sat inside a tough see-through case, still pulsing slow and steady. Under the lab's bright lights, they looked even stranger, almost pretty in their alien shapes. "Raising temperature to match the room," reported Sarah, our medic who jumped in to help. 21 degrees Celsius and holding. The warmer air changed them fast. Their pulsing sped up. Hair-thin cracks opened on their surfaces. A nearly invisible powder leaked out. Dust so fine and glittery it threw rainbows in the light, swirling above the case. "Amazing," Shelton whispered, lining up the camera. He leaned in way too close, hypnotized. "They're rearranging their structure to match the new heat." Before I could remind him to back off, he took a huge, deep breath like he wanted to taste the discovery itself. The shimmering specks spun around his face, giving him an eerie glow. "This might be the find of our lifetimes," he said, turning to me with starry eyes full of ambition. "We ought to call the Geological Survey team and get this thing opened up." I nodded, already outlining the report in my head. Around us, crew trickled in, pulled by news of the breakthrough. Someone pulled champagne from their private stash, glasses lifted for a toast. Not one of us saw how the sparkling powder had already leaked out, clinging to our clothes, sitting in our lungs, drifting unseen through the whole ship. Beautiful, hidden, waiting. "To discovery," Captain Moore said, raising her glass high. "To discovery," we all echoed, breathing deep the air that would break us apart and put us back together again. The soft clink of glasses and cheerful voices echoed through the lab as we toasted our discovery. I should have recognized the shimmering motes dancing in the beams of the overhead lights for what they were, the harbingers of our undoing. Instead, I wrote them down as a fascinating anomaly, another piece of data in what would surely be the publication of a lifetime. Morning arrived with unusual silence. The Argo typically hummed with activity by 7 in the morning, researchers eager to make the most of valuable sea time. But when I entered the mess hall at 7:30, only Captain Moore and Chief Engineer Davenport were there, both nursing coffee cups with unusual sluggishness. "Where is everyone?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of the bitter ship brew. "Sleeping in, apparently," Moore replied, her voice slightly hoarse. She rubbed her neck absently. "Can't blame them after last night. Though you look bright enough." I nodded, not mentioning I had left the celebration early. "Any word from Shelton? I want to discuss running composition analyses on the nodule cores today." Davenport shook his head slowly, the motion seeming to take unusual effort. "Haven't seen him. He was pretty excited about those rocks of yours." The day moved forward with a strange heaviness settling over the ship. By afternoon, the sluggishness had become obvious enough that Moore called an informal gathering. Most of the crew showed up, but something was off. Movements were slower, responses delayed by tiny moments that my analytical mind couldn't help but notice. Dr. Jenkins, our medic, suggested mild dehydration from the previous night's party. "Nothing mysterious," she assured with a tired smile. "Drink water, take vitamins, get rest." When Dr. Shelton finally appeared at 2 in the afternoon, shuffling into the lab where I was organizing samples, I immediately sensed something wrong. His normally lively gestures were stiff, almost mechanical. "Aris, are you feeling all right?" I asked, watching how he winced when bending to examine the nodules. "Just some joint stiffness," he said, rolling his shoulders with visible discomfort. "Probably slept wrong. Ship beds, you know." He tried to laugh, but it came out stiff and unnatural. "These beauties are worth a little discomfort anyway." Under the harsh fluorescent lights, I noticed something I'd missed before. A faint, pearly sheen on Shelton's exposed forearms and neck. Not sweat, not quite a rash, but as if his skin had gained a subtle, shimmering quality. "You should have Jenkins look at that," I said, pointing to his arms. He glanced down, seeming to notice the first time. "Huh. Probably just dry skin from the lab air." He flexed his fingers, grimacing. "Joints are so tight today, like everything's hardening." The word choice struck me as odd, but I went back to my work. Hours later, when I delivered early findings to the bridge, I noticed Ensign Chen moving with the same stiff, mechanical slowness. His eyes caught the overhead lights strangely, a glassy reflection where there should have been only human tissue. That evening, half the crew showed similar symptoms. Conversations were quiet, movements careful. Captain Moore kept touching her throat as if swallowing was becoming hard. In the corner, Dr. Jenkins examined her own reflection in a darkened monitor, tracing her jawline with growing worry. My scientific mind kicked into high gear, searching for logical explanations. Food poisoning, carbon dioxide buildup, some chemical reaction with the ship's systems. I ran checks on the environmental controls, but everything showed normal. Water samples were clean. Before turning in, I noticed something disturbing in my quarters. A fine, glittering film had settled on every surface. The same shimmering dust I'd seen released from the nodules now coated my desk, my books, my equipment. I tried wiping it away, but it seemed to cling at a deep level, impossible to remove completely. Sleep wouldn't come. I kept hearing odd sounds, not quite creaking, but something like the faint cracking of ice under pressure. At 3 a.m, I wandered the corridors and found Dr. Shelton in the specimen lab, staring fixedly at the nodules. "Aris?" I approached cautiously. When he turned, the overhead lights caught his face at an angle that made my stomach drop. The pearly quality had gotten stronger. His skin no longer looked fully human, more like polished stone with human features. His movements were jarringly stiff, as if his joints were fighting against something. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he whispered, his voice hollow and echoing like speaking through glass. "I can feel it, changing, making perfect." "Feel what?" "Aris, what's happening to you?" His eyes, now reflecting light in sharp angled patterns, met mine. "Evolution, Rowan, or perhaps preservation." I backed away, my heart pounding. As I retreated to my quarters, I noticed the first signs in myself, a subtle stiffness in my fingers as I gripped the corridor handrail, a tightness across my shoulders that hadn't been there yesterday. And in the mirror, just at the edge of my hairline, the first faint glimmer of something beautiful and terrifying beginning to bloom. I stood in front of my cabin mirror, fingers trembling as I brushed back my hair to examine the faint, shimmering patch at my hairline. Under the harsh fluorescent lighting, it caught and bent the light, creating tiny rainbows that flickered across my face. No pain, just a strange numbness, like the area had been numbed by a doctor. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night carefully noting changes in my body, using the same calm, organized way I'd track any scientific oddity. By morning, the patch had spread out 0.5 centimeter in every direction. The skin felt smooth, cool to the touch, like polished rock crystal. I needed to find Dr. Jenkins. The ship felt wrong as I walked the corridors, too quiet. The normal morning activity was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness broken only by occasional sounds. A glass smashing nearby, a muffled sob, the heavy scrape of something being dragged across metal. I found Sarah Jenkins in the medical bay, bent over microscope slides. Her back was to me, shoulders tight beneath her lab coat. "Sarah," I said, my voice rough, "I need you to look at something." When she turned, I stepped back. The left side of her face had changed completely overnight, a smooth, clear surface like cut glass that reflected the light. Her left eye, now made of many shining facets, still moved inside its socket. The right side of her face was still human, twisted in pain. "I can't help you, Rowan." Her voice was tight. "Can't even help myself." She forced the words out through stiff lips. Her right hand shook as she showed me a broken syringe. Tried to get blood from Martinez. The needle snapped. Whatever this is, medicine won't fix it. A scream tore through the corridor, high and panicked, then choked off. We both froze. "The lab," I said, my scientist's mind clinging to routine. "Aris, we have to see what's happening to him." The main lab was a nightmare. Dr. Shelton sat bolt upright in his chair, his body now almost entirely turned to crystal. Only his eyes could move, jerking wildly as we came in. He was as clear as spring water, his organs shadowy shapes trapped inside. The overhead lights shot through him, splashing rainbows across the sterile white surfaces of the lab. "My God," Sarah breathed. Aris's eyes locked onto us, wide with absolute terror and understanding. A faint, steady pulse of light came from inside his chest, his heart still beating inside its glassy cage. "He's conscious," I said, cold dread washing over me. "He can see us. He knows." Captain Moore slammed into the lab, movements stiff and clumsy. The right side of his body glittered under the lights, his uniform ripped open where growing crystal had torn the fabric. "Everyone's changing," he gasped. Davenport just stopped, mid-sentence, standing on the bridge like a damn statue. The captain's one human eye was wide with panic. "Send a distress call. Lock down the ship. We can't let this reach." His words cut off as a wave of crystal visibly ripped across his throat. He grabbed his neck, eyes bulging. The change sped up before us, spreading like ice across a freezing window pane. Within seconds, his outstretched arm hardened completely. Then his chest, his face last, features locked in a silent scream. Then stillness. Captain Moore stood before us, a perfect crystal figure trapped in terror. Only his eyes still moved, flicking between Sarah and me. Sarah backed up, hitting a lab table hard. "This is happening too fast. It's speeding up." She was right. Morning roll call had shown 8 crew members still moving. Now I wondered how many were left. I looked down at my hands. The stiffness had reached my wrists, and beneath the skin on my forearms, a faint shimmer raced through my veins like liquid diamond. "We have to record everything," I said, my training pushing through the rising fear. "Samples, data, what we've seen. Anything that might help someone who finds this place." Sarah nodded, but her movements were stiffening. "Rowan, I can't feel my legs anymore. Can't." Helpless horror filled me as she braced against the table. Her legs had already changed beneath her lab coat. Light rippled through the fabric as they hardened into crystal. "It doesn't hurt," she whispered, her voice filled with frightening calm. "It feels like stepping into cool water." Her change was faster than the captain's. Within minutes, she was completely encased, frozen forever, leaning towards a microscope she'd never use again. Her eyes, now shimmering jewels, watched me with awful understanding. I backed out of the lab, breath catching in short gasps. The stiffness had dug deeper into my joints, and a chilling cold spread across my back. The corridors of the Argo, once so familiar, now felt like a crystal tomb. Somewhere ahead, a strangled cry was abruptly silenced. Then, nothing. Utter quiet. I was running out of time. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood frozen, not by the creeping crystal, not yet, but by the cold realization that that strangled cry might have been the last human sound I'd ever hear aboard the Argo. I forced myself forward, my joints aching with every step. The corridor stretched ahead, eerie under the dim emergency lights, throwing long shadows. My footsteps echoed, the only sound in the crushing quiet. I reached the mess hall first. Through the doorway, I saw 4 crewmates frozen mid-meal: Martinez, Cho, Davenport, and Rodriguez. Martinez's hand stretched toward a coffee mug he'd never touch, his face a mask of surprise captured perfectly in clear, cold crystal. Davenport was caught mid-laugh, his mouth open in soundless amusement, light catching sharp angles in his transformed jaw. But their eyes, those crystalline, multifaceted eyes, followed me as I entered. Not dead. God, if only they were dead. Anything but this. I moved closer to Rodriguez, rigid as a board in his chair. "Can you hear me?" I whispered, my own voice rough from silence and fear. His frozen form gave no answer, but I swore I saw a flicker behind those jewel-bright eyes. Recognition, maybe, or pure panic. And within his chest, a faint pulse of light, rhythmic, like a heartbeat trapped in ice. They were still there, all of them, aware, trapped inside their own bodies. I stumbled backwards. Ice spread through me like frost across glass. My right hand was completely changed, a sculpture of shining crystal scattering rainbows. I could still feel a little, like touching everything through thick, cold glass. The bridge was next. Captain Moore stood at the helm reaching for the radio, a snapshot of fierce determination frozen forever. His helmsman, Peters, sat beside him, staring through the wide windows at the endless, empty ocean. As I moved through the dying ship, I counted them, all 12 souls, now a terrible gallery. The engineer frozen with a wrench in his crystallized grip. Our oceanographer paused mid-step in a corridor. Sarah Jenkins slumped over her useless medical kit, defeated even in death. And Shelton, poor, ambitious Shelton, still in the lab where I'd last seen him, a horrifying monument. He'd been first. Maybe he got the worst dose when the pods cracked open. His crystal eyes tracked me entering. I felt the blame. This was my project, my doing, my curse. I dragged myself back to the lab. Some desperate, stupid hope forced my steps. The nodules still pulsed inside their glass cage, glowing with that same wrong light. I stared at them. This nightmare life from the ocean's darkest pit, the horror that unmade us. My scientist's mind saw the horrible perfection, a tool made to breed inside something living, turning its host into a coffin and a cradle. With my one still working hand, I fumbled and got a slide under the microscope. I looked at my own changing skin magnified. An impossible structure, neither life nor stone, spreading fast through everything that made me human. I saw it happen. Cells turning to crystal as I watched. As the lens revealed my doom, the stiffness crept up my right arm past the elbow. It was speeding up. Soon I'd join my crew, another ornament in this floating house of horrors. I looked at the computer. There was still time, barely enough to write down the truth, enough to warn others to stay far away from these beautiful poison pods. I tried to flex my left hand, mostly flesh, but my fingertips now sparkled unnaturally under the lab lamps. My movements were getting stiff, slow. The cold reached my chest, making each shallow breath feel like inhaling splinters. I had hours, maybe, or only minutes. I had to move fast. One last look at Shelton. His eyes, begging. I pushed toward the comms deck. Each step felt heavier, legs creaking from the creeping crystal inside. My feet dragged like stone on stone. Behind me, glittering dust like diamond powder caught the light, my final trail in the husk of the Argo. The ship sailed on, piloting itself, slicing through the waves, carrying its silent cargo of living statues toward a destination gone forever. And somewhere deep in the black below us, more nodules pulsed with quiet alien light, waiting. My left arm no longer belonged to me. From fingertip to shoulder, it had transformed into a perfect sculpture of crystal and light. Beautiful, if it weren't still attached to my body. I watched rainbows dance across the bulkhead as sunlight filtered through my translucent fingers. The tingling had spread across my chest now. Not pain, never pain, just a gradual, numbing pressure, like being slowly wrapped in cooling glass. My right arm still worked for the most part, though it stiffened by the hour. If I was going to do anything useful with what little humanity I had left, it had to be now. I stumbled through the corridors, my movements jerky and awkward. The ship felt like a museum after closing time, filled with beautiful statues frozen in their last moments of terror or quiet acceptance. I passed Davis in the hallway, his body bent forward mid-stride, one foot forever lifted from the deck. His eyes, made of crystal, followed me as I lurched past. "I am sorry," I whispered, my voice sounding strange and hollow in my partly rock-hard throat. The communications deck was empty, thankfully. I collapsed into the operator's chair, wincing as my hardening back creaked against the plastic. The console blinked softly, unaware its human operators had become something else entirely. Using fingers that no longer bent right, I turned on the emergency broadcast system. One last job. Not to save myself, that chance was gone hours ago, but to save others. To make sure no other ship made our mistake. "This is Senior Geochemist Rowan Waller of the research vessel Argo," I dictated, watching the words appear on the screen. My voice cracked, bits of sound escaping my throat, which was quickly losing its flexibility. "This is a Class 1 biohazard warning. Do not approach our vessel. Do not attempt recovery." I described everything, the nodules, the dust, the slow, unstoppable change. The computer faithfully recorded my increasingly broken speech. I explained how we were all still aware, trapped inside our crystal bodies, how we would probably stay like this forever. The organisms seem to turn carbon-based life into crystal shapes while keeping the mind alive, I continued, feeling the stiffness crawl up my neck. Maybe for saving, maybe for study. Maybe this is how they make more. My reflection in the dark screen showed the horrifying stage of my change. My left eye had started to facet, splitting my sight into broken bits of color. The right side of my face was still mostly human, twisted in concentration. "I can feel my thoughts changing," I said, the words getting harder to form. "Slowing down, getting sharper, like they're being saved in amber." The tingling reached my jaw. Soon I wouldn't be able to speak at all. My mostly flesh and blood right hand shook over the transmission button. "Coordinates follow. Quarantine this entire area. The nodules are still active deep down. They're waiting." With my last bit of movement, I pressed the send button. The console chimed its confirmation, a single, cheerful beep that felt wrong in this silent, dead ship. A strange calm washed over me as the crystal change hit my brainstem. My last clear sight was that little green sending light, flashing steadily. My final clear thought was the satisfaction of having done something right, something important. Then stillness, complete, unending stillness. And yet I stay, aware, watching, thinking with perfect crystal clarity as the Argo drifts on across a sea that doesn't care, waiting for someone to get our warning or to join our quiet crew.